I am a passionate backcountry public lands hunter. And that is who I am, and this is me on a really good day on the last pack out. But a lot of people know me for what I do, and I've always tried to keep those two things a little bit at arm's length, and I will tell you why. I've learned over the years that there are two kinds of people who run for public office. There are the people who are in the arena, as Teddy Roosevelt used to call it, because they want to do something, because they want to accomplish something, right? And then there are the folks who are in the arena because they want to be somebody. And the thing that I've learned about the folks who want to accomplish something, the doers, as Lan called them earlier, is that their identity is exactly the same whether they're in or out of public office. This is my son Micah. He's 12 now. That's pictured with his sister Ella, who's adopted, but don't tell her. And this is Micah with his first mule deer last year. Please don't tell him that his first mule deer might be his best. I've never had a deer like that. I'm still trying. But that distinction between identity and what you do for a living was actually really driven home for me by one of Micah's friends. And Micah's 12 now, but he was probably 8 at the time, and his buddy Jack was 9. Jack's not from New Mexico, and his dad actually relayed the story to me. And we were all getting to know each other, and Jack's father wanted to just test the waters and see if he even knew what Micah's dad did for a living. Did he know I was the senator from New Mexico? So logically, he asked his son, he's like, do you know what Micah's dad does for a living? And I love Jack's answer because it's the kind of answer that a 9-year-old gives in a literal world. He looks at his dad and he says, yeah, Dad, I know what Micah's dad does. He's a hunter. And I took a lot of pride in that answer because I think everyone in this room has that identity, right? Like, this is not just something we do, and it's not even just how we feed our families. It's who we are. And today I can say that I believe I'm a pretty accomplished hunter. Now, the way I measure this has nothing to do with score. It has nothing to do with antlers or inches. It has everything to do with trying to keep ahead of my boys in the freezer. And for the last 15 years, I've pretty much been able to do that by cobbling together a lot of different hunts. But it wasn't always like that, and I too am an adult onset hunter. Those of you who learned this stuff from your father or from some other role model in your family, count your blessings, because I didn't even have the sense to take 3 people in the backcountry. When I was in my 20s, I decided I'm going to learn to hunt. And I was making my living as an outfitter guide, but not like a Ryan Callahan, hunter guide. I was somebody who took people in the backcountry to teach them about wilderness skills and ecology and geology. And so I really think I don't need a mentor, right? Who needs a mentor? So I pulled my first bull elk tag in northern New Mexico in this unit that's largely made up of the Pecos Wilderness. And I remember I drove up the day before the first day of the hunt. And I locked up my truck, and I threw on my pack, and I threw on my rifle, and I headed up the trail. And it's a steep trail into the Santa Barbara River Basin. And after a couple hours, I realized, should have started a little earlier. So it's getting dark, and I'm getting cold. And, I own all of this outdoor gear, but when I went and bought camo, probably shouldn't have bought the cotton. And I realized maybe I should camp for the night a little early. And so I finally get to a place that's not so steep, and I'm surrounded by aspen. And I think I'm just going to try to camp here for the night. So I stop and I put my pack down, and I put my rifle down, and I start to look around for a place to camp. And you know, those aspens, they all kind of look the same. That's what, you know, genetic identicalness does. So I'm looking around and I realize I'm turned around and I better grab my pack and put some warm clothes on, and I can't find my pack. And I'm thinking, this is really dumb, Martin. Like, you're in over your head here. Maybe I should have tried to find a mentor. So I'm shivering and I'm cold, and I finally get calmed down and I make a few spirals. I locate my pack and my rifle and think, whew, boy, dodged a bullet on that one. And I head up a little further up the trail until I find a good place to bivvy for the night. But I was so cold and tired the next morning, I completely sleep through first shooting light. So I missed the best minutes of the first day of my first bull elk hunt. But I had heard a lot of stuff about elk. And one of the things I heard is that elk like to bed down in the dark timber in the middle of the day. So I'm just going to apply myself to trying to stalk through the dark timber. So I climb up one of those ridges, and I spent the next couple of days doing this. I did get up on time the second day. The second or third day, I find a raghorn bull in the dark timber in the middle of the day in a patch of blowdown a mile wide. And I think, man, I'm almost there. And I'm trying to get a shot at this bull. And the best thing that ever happened to me is I caught my external frame pack, because I'm optimistic, right, on a standing dead tree, make a bunch of noise, and spook this elk deeper into the timber, because by that time, the same part of my brain that kind of woke up when I lost my pack is saying, hey, you know, your truck is 8 miles away on the trail, and you're by yourself, and you're 3,500 feet above your truck, and you've never field dressed a big game animal. And you sure haven't field dressed a bull elk. And by the way, do you remember that you're standing in the middle of a patch of blowdown and timber a mile wide? So that was the best blown stock of my entire hunting career. Because if I had let my enthusiasm get the best of me, I would still either be trying to pack that raghorn out, or I would have just given up on hunting trying to get those quarters over all the blowdown. But I'm driving home, and I've got an empty cooler in my truck, and a lot of things in my mind are actually starting to come together. And I start to develop this connection between, I really like this hunting thing, even though I wasn't so good at it, and my passion for public lands, and my passion for protecting the places that we can have adventures like this. And I'm really now passionate about handing that on to the next generation, right? So this is my son Carter. He is 16. He had his birthday on a backpacking trip 2 weeks ago into the Gila Wilderness, the first American wilderness. And you can tell now he's the kind of kid you want to take on your elk hunt, because he's big enough to pack like the rear quarter out. But when he got his first tag, he was not. He was 13 years old. He was a lot smaller. But he had all the enthusiasm that I had in my 20s and probably more since. And he pulled a tag in the Continental Divide wilderness study area north of the Gila. This is amazing country, but you got to earn your elk. In the first few days, he's up and down, thousands of vertical feet, but we're having a hard time getting in on an elk. And it's pretty thick when you're in the trees, and then it's pretty open when you're not in the trees. But finally, on the third day, we spot a herd of elk kind of out in the open in some thin ponderosa pine, but they're a long way away. And so we start to make a stalk on them. And it takes us several hours just to get in the same zip code with these elk. And by the time we're getting within a few hundred yards, it is now sunset. And we have to make some decisions. And so we decide we're going to take some chances and get in on them fast. And you know, when you're trying to be completely silent and move really fast and see the elk before they see you, I have found that that never works. But Carter, to his credit, he spots an elk at 85 yards at the very edge of this herd. And its head is down and it's grazing. And I decide to tell him, sit down, get your breathing in place, and take the shot if you want. But you better do it fast because we've got 3 minutes of shooting light at this point. And I hear him take off the safety and that report from the rifle, and he thought he missed the elk, but I already knew at this point that he had his first elk. I had heard the hit. And you can kind of see from the look on his face the kind of pride that comes along with that. I wish I had a picture of me and the pride on my face as I watched him learn to field dress that elk. I watched him respect that animal. I watched him help pack it out of the backcountry. And I watched him share it lovingly with pride with our family and our friends for a very long time to come. We always called it Carter's elk when we shared those elk steaks. And he and I now have these memories that will always keep us together. Memories of wall tents and campfires and a billion stars in one of the places left in the lower 48 where you have almost no light pollution, and stalking in on that first elk. Now this brings me kind of full circle to the what I do part of my life. This is where I spend a lot of my year, even more than land does. This is not my natural habitat, and right now I don't recommend it for most human beings. But I do this work because I get to work with groups like BHA. And I get to work with folks like Lantani and the New Mexico BHA crew. And the result of that is that we are all doers, and we all can change what happens, and we can protect those wild spaces that the next generation deserves to have the same adventures that we had, right? This is a place called the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument. It's in northern New Mexico. It's about 250,000 acres. It includes some of the most important wintering habitat for a herd of elk that moves back and forth between New Mexico and Colorado. It's got the Rio Grande Gorge running down the middle of it. And don't ever let folks tell you that you can't have hunting in a national monument, because when New Mexico did this, and backcountry hunters and anglers were there at the beginning, and sportsmen were there at the beginning to talk about what this monument would look like, they made sure that they were a part of the future. We just designated 2 new wilderness areas in this national monument in S47. This is my buddy Nick, who owns a fly shop in Taos. He has the elk dialed in this unit, and I drew this tag for later this year. Go to the other end of the state. This is a place called Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks National Monument. It is 500,000 acres of some of the most amazing Chihuahuan Desert mule deer habitat, javelina habitat, Mearns quail habitat. And the same thing is true. It was really sportsmen who stepped up and said, we want this. And we especially want not just the scenic mountains, but we want the mountains where the mule deer are and where the game is and where the quail is. And we just designated 10 new wilderness areas inside this monument in S47 so that the next generation can have that same access to a blank spot on the map that we've had. You know you're in southern New Mexico when there's no trees. You can tell what the birds of prey use to perch on, but it was still a good place to glass from. Now, you can't obviously fish in Oregon Mountains Desert Peaks, but if you go back up to Taos County, you can fish in places like Columbine Hondo. And we were able to protect Columbine Hondo as one of the main tributaries of the Rio Grande and as one of the important trout fisheries in northern New Mexico as well. It's also some of the best wilderness bighorn sheep hunting that you will find anywhere in the lower 48, even if you count Montana and Idaho. This place is really near and dear to my heart. This is Valles Caldera National Preserve. And as I showed some of you over the course of the last few nights, if you actually Google image search Valles Caldera National Preserve from space, and you pull up some images and some maps, you'll find out that it looks just like the paw of the grizzly bear in the BHA logo. I kid you not. Try it later tonight. But this used to be private land. And it was stewarded by a wonderful family who took incredible care of it. But when I moved to New Mexico out of college, this was all inaccessible. And today, thanks to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, this is 89,000 acres of some of the best backcountry elk hunting and some of the best trout fishing in the lower 48. So that's why groups like BHA matters, because as Lan said, you guys are doers. And it makes it possible for all of us to be able to not just have campfire stories at the rendezvous and campfire memories that we forge right here, but to make damn sure that our kids and their kids and our great-grandkids have the places on this planet to have the same sorts of adventures in the backcountry, to experience the things that all of you have experienced, that I've experienced. Because I don't want to live in a world or a country where they don't have that. So thank you for making that possible.